Hello, this is Gameli, RevitTunes.com. Now let's continue with Revit MEP 2010. And now let's go to the Analyze tab, Heating and Cooling Loads, and we are going to see the Analytical model. Then you get to this window, and you can spin around the Analytical model just like normally you do in the 3D view. And you could either use this cube or shift and middle mouse and spin around. It's exactly the same. You have option right here, wireframe and shaded mode. And shaded mode will be this. So in this case I will leave it in wireframe. And let's look the general information here. This is something that we filled before. This is an office building, and you could fix it if you got the wrong one. And location, and then the building service, in this case water loop heat pump, and the building construction will live in general to be managed by the building that we already select all this information. So it will say by building, and is what we did before, all this information. I didn't change anything myself, that is supposed to be selected for each project. And building infiltration, I use medium, report type standard, ground level will be level 1, and phase new construction, and silver space tolerance 1 foot. Now let's look for the details. Okay, first what we are seeing is all this list of names are zones, and inside zones, like we did, is spaces, and few zones has several spaces in one zone, sometimes one big space in one zone. Now if I touch one and I hit here, it will highlight that particular, in this case is a whole zone, and where my mouse is pointing is where that zone is. I'm gonna spin it around, and this is the zone I'm highlighting, and I could isolate it with this button or just highlight it. Now let's go back to the other corner. Now let's review these dialog box. So the service type, we will leave it by building right now, and that means when we started the project, we chose what service type will have the building, the whole building. So in this case, it will be driven by the building. Right now, I'm adjusting only this zone. So I'm leaving the zone to be driven by the whole building service type. And the heating information is already selected 70-90. And if you have certain engineering reason why to change it, you could change it here, and you could use the humidification control, and you could set a percentage here. This is a very much engineering part that I don't know. I like I said, I have degree in architecture, not engineering. So now cooling information also. If you need to change it, you could use this humidity also. I'm not uh, I'm not putting any of these values for now. And outdoor air information not available, but if you want to put some of these values are available if you want to do very detailed. So these settings are for the whole this zone that I'm highlighting. So if I switch to another zone, let's change one just to say let's say this. I wanna change this value instead of 70. Let's say 75. So if I go back to the previous one, it's still 70. So I just wanna show you each of these zones could have its own settings. I wanna leave the way it was. So this is the list of zones right here, and each zone will have as sometimes a group of spaces. So now let's analyze some of the spaces, and I'm choosing 109 right here, and let's see what settings we have. Space type, this is a lounge. So right here is one which is called lounge and recreation. Right here. So when I choose this, all these values will adjust to the new space type, and right here are those numbers already adjusted. So each space should have its own type of parameters, and like in this case I'm choosing bathroom, so space type it should be on restroom, reception, restroom. So it will adjust all these values, area by per person, sensitivity, heat gain, all that. So let's go back to 109. Now construction type is by building, and I will leave it this one by building, but if you go by construction you will need to create one for this particular space, one for another space, but I will leave it driven by the building. This one driven by space, this one driven by the whole building. And people, you could choose here default values, and those are coming from the previous window we just were looking. And the lighting, you could change it also. I have the default values, but I could say specify, and I could specify also the power. This is lighting and power, and I could specify, but I will leave the default because it's the settings I want to use right now. And same thing as previously shown. Right now you see it's highlighted. I could unhighlight it. Now it's not visible. Now highlight it again. Now it's highlighted. I'm gonna zoom in, and I could isolate it. And that is one space. But if I choose the whole group of spaces, which is one zone, it will highlight or isolate, either way. So all these values needs to be filled, and I want to say okay, just to go back to one more point. the darker green we know is the zone, and by highlighting it will tell me if I go to this tab. I'm gonna deselect it. Now I'm gonna select it. So that is a flag. It says space cafeteria. If I move this to one side, I just moved the mark. I didn't move the space. I moved the mark. So if I say properties, each space has this window. I'm clicking on properties right now. Needs to be fill out all this information. Okay, so each room in this case, each space in this case is cafeteria, needs to be filled right here. Obviously it's not a plenum space, so it doesn't has a check mark there. It's occupiable, so it needs a check mark. Conditioned space, because it will have air conditioned service. And the space type by building, or you could choose for every space. In this case, that is a cafeteria, so lounge and recreation. And the construction type by building. And obviously, like I mentioned before, when we did by building, all this has been chosen. And people, by default, I'm gonna leave it. And by default, it already assigned certain number of people and certain percentage by square footage. Heat gain by per person also, the default has already selected something, so I don't change that. And for now, that's all we are going to change. So every space should be filled out in the same manner, obviously with the appropriate information.